The snow
Don't
did
leave
not
me
fall
here.
gently.
Please, I
It
can't
came
do
down
this.
in hard, slanted sheets,
What do you want me
as
to
if the
do?
sky had decided to
It's
scrape
over.
itself raw against the world. Headlights turned the storm into a tunnel of white needles. The wipers moved like frantic hands. Somewhere beyond the windshield, Connecticut held its breath. Lawns buried, branches bowed, the kind of quiet that didn't feel peaceful so much as watchful. Ethan Cole kept both hands on the steering wheel, not because the road demanded it, but because his body did. Habit was a language he spoke fluently now. By day, he fixed what people forgot to notice: flickering lights in the school hallway, doors that wouldn't latch, the stubborn plumbing that groaned like it resented being asked to work. Maintenance wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. Broken things repaired. At night, he drove delivery routes through neighborhoods where driveway gates were taller than his entire living room. He didn't like the night work. He liked even less what it said about his life. But the mortgage didn't care about grief, and groceries never once asked him how his heart was holding up. A folder lay on the passenger seat. Mia's school papers, corners bent from being opened too many times. He'd just come from the parent-teacher conference. Mrs. Keller had been kind in the way professionals were kind when they'd said the same thing 100 times and still wished it didn't hurt. "Mia is bright," she'd said, hands folded on the desk. "But she's withdrawn lately. She watches more than she speaks. It's like she's waiting for something to happen." The road swallowed them the moment Ethan eased back into traffic. Snow pressed against the windshield in slanted sheets, thick enough to make the world feel unfinished. The wipers worked in a steady rhythm, clearing just enough space to see what was immediately ahead. Inside the car, the heater hummed, filling the cabin with uneven warmth and the faint smell of old fabric and coffee long past its prime. Route 9 curved ahead, familiar and blind. Bare trees flanked the road like black ribs. Every few miles, the storm swallowed a mansion gate, the kind with stone lions and warm lights behind tall hedges. Homes so insulated from weather they might as well have been in another century. Ethan passed them the way you passed people in an airport. Close, but in different realities. His phone buzzed with another delivery ping. He didn't look. The road had grown slick, and his tires whispered over asphalt like a warning. And then, through the snow, something moved. At first he thought it was a deer, one pale shape breaking the whiteness. Then his headlights caught fabric. White fabric. A figure staggered along the shoulder, head down, hair plastered dark against her neck. She was walking as if each step cost her something, as if she wasn't sure whether she was moving toward an escape or a sentence. Ethan eased off the gas. A wedding dress, not the simple courthouse kind. This was silk and lace, the sort of gown that belonged under chandeliers and applause. But the hem was torn and heavy with slush, dragging along the asphalt. One heel swung from her hand like a broken ornament. The other foot was bare, skin already turning angry pink from the cold. His first instinct was the one he'd trained into himself. Keep going. Do not involve yourself. Do not get pulled into other people's storms. Most disasters began with a man thinking he could be a hero for 5 minutes. He had a daughter at home. A home that ran on careful budgets and careful hope. He didn't have room for strangers, and he definitely didn't have room for trouble dressed in white. He drove past her. Then he saw her face in the side mirror. Not clearly, just a slice of profile cut by snow and light. But in that half second, something in him tightened. Defiance. Not drama. Not hysteria. Something colder, older. Like a person who had been pushed against a wall so many times she'd finally chosen to become the wall. His chest did that familiar thing, an ache that wasn't pain exactly, but memory sharpening itself into a blade. There had been a night in the hospital when Sarah insisted on walking the corridor alone. She wore socks because her feet had swollen from chemo. Ethan offered his arm. Sarah refused it with a smile that broke him. "I need to do this on my own," she'd whispered. "Just this once." He hadn't understood then. He'd wanted to protect, to fix, to carry her the way you carried precious things. But he watched her walk anyway, one slow step at a time, shoulders trembling, refusing to be carried by the world. Now in the storm, Ethan recognized that same desperate dignity in the woman on the roadside. He signaled, slowed, and pulled onto the shoulder. The moment his tires stopped, the storm seemed louder. Snow slapped the hood, wind clawed at the windows. Ethan rolled down the passenger side window just enough for his voice to reach her. "Hey!" he called. "Miss, are you okay?" She didn't stop immediately. She kept walking as if she hadn't heard, as if she could outpace the sound of kindness. Ethan tried again, gentler this time, less like a question, more like an offering. "You're going to freeze out here." That made her pause. She turned slowly toward the car, and his headlights lit her fully. She was beautiful in the way expensive lives shaped people, carefully maintained, polished by good salons and good lighting. But that wasn't what struck him. It was the rawness underneath, the way her composure looked like thin ice over deep water. Her lips were slightly blue. Wet strands of hair stuck to her cheek. A fine shiver moved through her shoulders, quick and stubborn, like her body was arguing with reality. The gown's beating caught the light like tiny trapped stars. Near her waist, a dark stain spread, wine, not blood, but it looked like a story that had spilled. On her wrist, there was a faint red line, as if fingers had gripped too hard. She held his gaze with a boldness that felt practiced and exhausted at the same time. "I'm fine," she said. Her voice was cultured, not theatrical, just precise. The way people spoke when they'd been taught their words belonged to other people too. Ethan glanced up and down the road, nothing but snow and the smear of darkness. "In a wedding dress," he said quietly. "In a snowstorm." The smallest smile flickered at the corner of her mouth, then vanished like a candle in wind. "When you put it that way," she said, "it does sound dramatic." "I'm not judging you." Ethan kept his hands visible on the wheel. "I'm just saying, it's not safe." Her eyes flicked past him to the road behind his car, then to the trees, as if she expected headlights to bloom out of the storm at any second. Something in Ethan sharpened. "Do you need a ride?" he asked. She hesitated, a long hesitation full of calculation. "I don't have a destination," she admitted at last, voice dropping low, almost swallowed by the storm. Ethan reached across and pushed the passenger door open. The interior light came on, warm and small. "Then you can have warmth," he said. "No questions, no judgment, just a place to breathe until you know where you're going." She stood there one more beat, torn between pride and survival. Then she stepped closer, lifting the skirt with careful hands as if she'd been trained to protect expensive things even when everything else was collapsing. She slid into the passenger seat. The door shut, and the sound was startlingly intimate, like closing the lid on a secret. For a moment, Ethan did not drive. He listened to the heater hum. He listened to her breathing, controlled, stubborn, uneven at the edges. He cleared his throat. "I'm Ethan," he said. She didn't look at him right away. When she finally did, her eyes held something like gratitude that refused to soften into weakness. "Claire," she said. After a beat, she added, "Just Claire." Ethan nodded as if that was enough. He put the car into gear and pulled carefully onto the road. Snow swallowed the world again, but now there were two breaths inside the cabin instead of one. And Ethan had the sudden, unsettling sense that he hadn't just picked up a stranger, he'd picked up the beginning of something he wasn't ready to name. And yet. Claire sat rigid in the passenger seat, not tense in a panicked way, more like someone holding herself together through discipline alone. The seatbelt cut across the bodice of her wedding dress, pinning silk and lace beneath an ordinary strip of fabric. It looked almost absurd, like a fairy tale interrupted by reality. Ethan kept his eyes on the road, but he felt her attention moving quietly through the car. The dashboard, the glove compartment, the worn fleece jacket draped over the back seat, the folder of school papers resting near the shifter. She lingered on that last detail for half a second too long. "You have a child," she said. It wasn't a question. Ethan nodded. "A daughter. 8. Something shifted in Claire's expression. Not warmth, exactly, but recognition, as if the presence of a child changed the rules of the night. They drove in silence again. Snow piled along the curb in pale ridges, softening everything it touched. Even the expensive homes they passed, gates, hedges, stone pillars, looked smaller under the storm, their certainty dulled by weather. Ethan's phone buzzed on the mount. Another delivery request. He ignored it. Claire noticed anyway. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. Do what? Change your plans. For me. Ethan considered the road ahead, the narrow margin for error. Sometimes plans are the problem. She didn't respond, but her shoulders loosened a fraction. The silence stretched, and in it, Ethan became aware of her breathing, controlled, now shallow, carefully measured, the kind of breathing people used when they were trying not to fall apart in front of witnesses. "You're cold," he said. "I've been colder," she replied, too quickly. Ethan reached behind his seat and pulled forward the blanket he kept for emergencies, one of Mia's, soft with age, printed with faded cartoon animals. He handed it to Claire without comment. She hesitated before taking it, fingers brushing the fabric as if unsure whether warmth came with conditions. Then she wrapped it around her shoulders. Her eyes flicked down to the childish print. Something like disbelief crossed her face. "Thank you," she said, quietly enough that it felt private. They continued through the storm. Claire glanced at the rearview mirror, once, twice, then again. Not at her reflection, but at the road behind them. Ethan noticed. "Do you think someone's following you?" he asked. "No," she said immediately. Then, after a beat, "I don't know." That honesty sounded like it cost her. "If you're not sure," Ethan said, "we don't go straight anywhere." She turned to look at him fully for the first time. Her gaze was sharp, assessing, not fearful, but alert. "Where are you taking me?" "Somewhere public first," he said. "Lights, cameras." Her shoulders eased slightly. "You're being practical." "Sensible," Ethan corrected without humor. "It's all I'm good at these days." He turned off Route 9 toward a gas station glowing at the edge of town. Its fluorescent lights cut through the snow like a promise that didn't pretend to be pretty. Ethan parked beneath a camera and put the car in park. "I'm going to get you something warm," he said. "You can stay here. Doors locked." "You don't have to," Claire said again. Ethan looked straight ahead. "I know." Inside the station, warmth rushed to meet him. He grabbed a plain black hoodie, knit gloves, and after a moment's hesitation, a pair of cheap fleece socks. Nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention. When he returned, Claire hadn't moved. She accepted the items silently, pulling the hoodie over her wedding dress. The silk bunched awkwardly beneath it, but the effect was human, like someone stepping out of a costume. She exhaled as the warmth settled in. "You can laugh," Ethan said as he slid back into the driver's seat. "I know how it looks." A breath escaped her that almost counted as a laugh. It didn't last, but it existed. They pulled back onto the road. Under the cabin light, Ethan noticed a faint red mark around her wrist, half hidden beneath the hoodie cuff. "You said you weren't hurt," he said gently. "It's nothing," she replied, eyes forward. He didn't argue. Instead, he asked, "Is there anyone you trust? Someone you can call?" Claire stared through the windshield, watching the snow erase the world. "No," she said. The word landed heavily. Ethan thought of Mia asleep at home, curled around her stuffed rabbit. He thought of the way children trusted first and learned caution later, and how some adults never unlearned it. "Where do you live?" he asked. "I don't," Claire answered. "Not anymore." She swallowed. "I gave up my apartment when I moved in with him." "With your fiancé," Ethan said. She nodded once. "And your parents?" Her jaw tightened. "They're the reason I was wearing that dress." Silence settled again, thicker now. Ethan felt anger rise, not loud or reckless, but steady. Anger at systems that dressed control as care, at lives where choice came with invisible strings. He turned onto a quieter street lined with modest houses. Snow softened porches and mailboxes, made everything look briefly equal. He stopped in front of a colonial revival with peeling paint and a porch light glowing stubbornly against the storm. "My place," he said, not yet turning off the engine. "I have a guest room, cameras, and I don't think you should be alone tonight." Claire stared at the house as if it were something fragile. "You don't know me," she said. "I know," Ethan replied. But I know what it looks like when someone is trying to outrun a life that won't let them breathe." Her eyes shone and she looked away quickly. Outside, the snow kept falling, indifferent and relentless. Ethan eased into the driveway. The porch light pooled gold across the steps, and beside him, wrapped in a child's blanket and borrowed warmth, Claire sat in silence. And still. Ethan had nodded because nodding was easier than admitting he was waiting too. Waiting for the world to stop taking things. 2 years ago, cancer had taken Sarah, his wife, Mia's mother, and left behind a house full of quiet rooms and one little girl who learned too young that love could vanish without permission. Since then, Ethan had become a man made of schedules and careful breathing. He woke, he worked, he cooked, he checked homework, he kissed Mia's forehead, and when the house fell asleep, he drove into the cold like someone paying a debt. Ethan turned off the engine, but neither of them moved. The sudden quiet felt louder than the storm. Snow ticked softly against the windshield. The porch light cast a narrow cone of gold over the steps, stopping just short of the driveway, as if the house itself were hesitant to invite anyone new all the way in. Claire sat very still. The borrowed hoodie hung awkwardly over the wedding dress, a truce between two lives that did not belong together. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers laced tightly enough that the knuckles had gone pale. "You don't have to decide anything right now," Ethan said. His voice sounded careful, like he was speaking near something fragile. "If you want, I can take you somewhere else. A hotel. A friend's place." Claire shook her head slowly. "I don't want somewhere else," she said. "I just don't know how to be anywhere." Ethan understood that sentence more than he wanted to. He reached for the door handle, paused, then stopped himself. "Before we go in," he said, "there's something you should know." Claire turned toward him, alert again. "My daughter," he continued. "She might be home." Her eyes widened. "I don't want to scare her." "You won't," Ethan said, then softened. "But she's had enough surprises in her life. I don't want to lie to her." Claire absorbed this quietly. "How old?" 8. She nodded once. "I'll follow your lead." That was the first time Ethan noticed how easily she offered him that trust, and how deliberate it was. Not desperate, chosen. He stepped out into the cold, boots crunching on the snow, and walked around to open her door. The storm rushed in immediately, biting at exposed skin. Claire gathered the skirt of her dress, hesitating for just a second before placing her bare foot onto the frozen ground. She winced, then straightened, refusing help. Ethan watched, conflicted. He admired the strength even as it worried him. Inside, the house smelled like lemon cleaner and something faintly sweet, Sarah's old candle, the one Ethan still forgot to throw away. The hallway light glowed warm, illuminating framed photographs along the wall. Claire stopped just inside the door. The air here was different. Not tense, dense, lived in. Family photos lined the entryway, Ethan and Sarah on a beach years ago, wind tangling her hair as she laughed into the camera. A hospital photo, Sarah pale but smiling. Newborn. Mia bundled against her chest. Another frame, more recent, showing Mia at 6, missing 2 teeth and grinning proudly beside a crooked snowman. Claire's breath caught, barely audible. "It's full," she said. Ethan closed the door behind them, shutting out the storm. "It wasn't supposed to be empty," he replied before he could stop himself. An awkward silence followed, thick with meanings neither of them reached for. A small voice floated down the hallway. "Dad?" Ethan's shoulders tensed. Mia appeared in the doorway, wrapped in an oversized sweater, her hair a sleep musk halo around her face. She squinted at the unfamiliar shape beside him. "Emma's mom brought me home," she said matter-of-factly. "She said the roads were bad." Then her eyes dropped. To the hoodie, the blanket, the white fabric peeking out beneath. Her gaze narrowed with curiosity rather than fear. "Why is there a lady dressed like a cake?" she asked. Claire froze. Ethan closed his eyes for half a second, then opened them. "Mia," he said gently. "This is Claire. She needed some help tonight." Mia studied Claire seriously, the way children did when they were deciding whether someone belonged in their universe. "You're cold," Mia announced. "You should take off your shoes." Claire blinked. "I don't have them." Mia frowned deeply, processing this injustice. Then she disappeared down the hallway and returned moments later with a pair of thick socks, pink, mismatched, and unmistakably too small. "You can borrow these," she said solemnly. "They're lucky." Claire crouched slightly to meet her eye level. The movement was stiff, careful. "Thank you," she said, and this time the gratitude in her voice trembled. "I think I could use some luck." Mia nodded, satisfied. Dad says luck is just showing up when you're scared. Ethan swallowed. In the kitchen, Ethan set water to boil while Claire perched on a stool at the island, the blanket still wrapped around her shoulders. Mia sat across from her, swinging her legs and watching with open interest. My mom used to make tea when it snowed, Mia said suddenly. She said it helped the house feel brave. Claire glanced at Ethan, uncertain. She sounds wise, Claire said carefully. She was, Mia replied. She knew things. Ethan turned away, busying himself with mugs so his daughter wouldn't see his face. They drank in quiet for a few minutes. The ticking of the wall clock filled the spaces between them. Finally, Mia asked, "Are you running away?" The question landed cleanly without accusation. Claire hesitated. Then she nodded. Yes. From a bad guy? Mia pressed. Claire considered. From a life that wasn't mine. Mia frowned again, thinking hard. My dad says you're allowed to change your mind. Ethan looked up sharply. He didn't remember teaching her that. I think he's right, Claire said. Mia smiled, apparently pleased with herself. You can stay in the guest room. It has the good blanket. Claire's eyes glistened. She looked at Ethan, silently asking permission. For tonight, Ethan said. That's all we're deciding. Mia hopped off her stool. Okay, I'm going back to bed then. She paused at the doorway and looked back at Claire. If you have nightmares, you can knock on the wall. That's what I do. Claire pressed a hand to her mouth. Thank you, she whispered. After Mia disappeared, the house settled again, but it felt different now. Less like a museum, more like a place that remembered how to breathe. Ethan showed Claire to the guest room. It was simple, a neatly made bed, a dresser, a small lamp casting a soft pool of light. The quilt was old but clean, stitched by Sarah's mother decades ago. I'll get you some clothes, Ethan said. They'll be old and probably not your style. Claire shook her head. I don't have a style anymore. He returned with a sweater and sweatpants that still faintly smelled like lavender detergent. Claire accepted them with quiet reverence. At the door, Ethan hesitated. If you need anything, he said, I'm down the hall. Claire nodded. Thank you for not asking too many questions. Ethan met her gaze. Some answers need sleep first. He turned off the hallway light and walked back toward his room. As he lay in bed later, staring at the ceiling, he listened to the familiar sounds of the house, the hum of the refrigerator, the wind brushing the siding, the soft certainty that Mia was safe in the next room. For the first time in a long while, there was another sound layered into it all, another presence, not an intrusion, a possibility. And somewhere between exhaustion and vigilance, Ethan realized the house had not just let someone in, it had remembered how to open its door, and more. Morning came quietly, not the triumphant kind that burst through curtains with birdsong and certainty, but a careful morning. Thin light seeping through blinds, the house waking the way it always did now, one small sound at a time. The furnace clicked on. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere down the hall, a floorboard sighed under familiar weight. Ethan lay awake longer than he needed to. He listened for movement from the guest room and heard none. For a moment he wondered if the night had been some elaborate trick of exhaustion. Snow, silk, a woman stepping out of the storm and into his life for a few hours before vanishing with daylight. Then he heard water running. The shower. Relief loosened something in his chest. Not happiness, just proof. He got up and padded into the kitchen. Habit guided him. Kettle filled, mugs out, bread into the toaster. He moved quietly, as if sound itself might startle the fragile balance of the house. Mia emerged a few minutes later, hair tangled, pajama sleeves too long. Is she still here? She asked, rubbing sleep from one eye. Yes, Ethan said. Mia nodded, satisfied. Okay. She climbed onto her chair and began coloring without further comment, as if the presence of a stranger in the guest room was not a disruption, but a fact to be incorporated. Children were good at that, making room where adults panicked. Claire appeared in the doorway moments later. She wore one of Sarah's sweaters, soft gray, loose at the shoulders, and a pair of Ethan's old sweatpants rolled at the waist. Her hair was damp and pulled back in a simple knot. Without the dress, without the silk and the careful architecture of ceremony, she looked younger, lighter, almost ordinary. Almost. "Good morning," she said. Her voice still carried polish, but the edge had dulled. She looked around the kitchen as if memorizing it, the magnets on the fridge, the crayon drawing taped beside a grocery list, the plant Sarah had insisted would survive even neglect. "Morning," Ethan replied. He gestured to the counter. "Coffee, tea, there's cereal." Claire smiled faintly. "Coffee would be perfect." Mia slid a piece of paper toward her. "I'm drawing the snow from last night," she announced. "You can add something if you want." Claire hesitated, then took the crayon. She drew a small house with a light in the window. Nothing dramatic, just something that stayed on. After breakfast, Ethan walked Mia to the bus stop. The snow had eased into a quiet drift, the world rinsed clean and deceptively new. Mia climbed aboard, waved, then turned serious at the last second. "Be nice," she said, pointing between Ethan and the house. Ethan smiled despite himself. "We will." When the bus disappeared, he stood for a moment in the cold, hands shoved into his pockets, and let the silence press against him. He didn't know what came next. He knew only that next existed now. Inside, Claire sat at the kitchen table, fingers wrapped around her mug. She watched steam rise as if it were a language she was trying to learn. "Thank you for letting her be a child about it," she said when Ethan returned. "She didn't look at me like I was broken." "She doesn't do broken," Ethan replied. "She does present." Claire absorbed that. "That's a gift." They sat across from each other, the space between them measured and respectful. Sunlight crept across the table, illuminating the faint mark on Claire's wrist that the hoodie had hidden the night before. It had darkened into a bruise. Ethan noticed. He didn't comment. Instead, he asked, "Do you want to tell me what happened?" Claire didn't answer immediately. She took a slow sip of coffee, as if buying time with warmth. "I was supposed to get married last night," she said at last. "I figured," Ethan said gently. She nodded. 500 guests, a cathedral that smelled like polish and history, a photographer who knew which side was my good one. Ethan waited. "The man I was supposed to marry," Claire continued, "is very powerful." "Powerful how?" Ethan asked. She smiled without humor. "The kind that doesn't need to announce itself." She set the mug down carefully. "The wedding wasn't about love, it was about alignment. My family's name, his reach, public confidence after a complicated year." "A transaction," Ethan said. "Yes." Claire exhaled. "A beautiful one, carefully marketed. I was the final asset." Ethan felt anger stir, controlled but sharp. "And you agreed to it." "I did," she said. "For a long time I believed agreeing was the same as choosing." She looked down at her hands. "There were contracts, not just the marriage license, non-disclosure, image management. I was to step away from my work, no independent statements, no interviews, no opinions that weren't approved." Ethan leaned back slightly, absorbing this. "And you signed." "I initialed," Claire corrected softly. "Every page but one." She met his eyes. "The last clause required me to dissolve my professional entity and transfer my portfolio to a holding company." Ethan's brow furrowed. "Your work." "My voice," she said. "My name." He understood then, not fully but enough. "What happened in the church?" he asked. Claire closed her eyes briefly. "I stood at the altar and realized that everyone there was celebrating the disappearance of a person. They were applauding it, cameras flashing like approval." Her voice steadied as she spoke, but her hands trembled now. "I felt small, not scared, erased." Ethan remembered the hospital corridor, Sarah refusing his arm, the dignity of walking even when it hurt. "So you ran," he said. "Yes." Claire's lips curved, something like relief passing through her. "I ran through the reception hall, past the flowers, past my mother's face when she understood that this wasn't cold feet, it was refusal." She swallowed. Someone tried to stop me. That's how I... She glanced at her wrist. Ethan's jaw tightened. I didn't want to be rescued, Claire said quietly. I wanted to be intact. Silence settled between them, heavy but honest. Finally, Ethan said, "What do you want now?" Claire stared at the window, at the snow brightening into slush. I don't know, she admitted. I've spent years being excellent at what people needed me to be. I'm not practiced at wanting. That can be learned, Ethan said. She looked at him, surprised. You sound sure. I'm not, he said, but I've learned that certainty is overrated. Claire smiled at that, a real one this time. Brief, but genuine. I don't expect to stay, she said. I know this isn't a solution. It's a pause. Ethan nodded. Pauses matter. They sat again, the morning stretching around them, neither rushing to fill it. Outside, a plow rumbled past, scraping the road clean. Somewhere in the house, the clock marked time without judgment. Claire broke the quiet. They'll come looking. Ethan met her gaze. Who? Lawyers, she said. Quiet ones. Ethan felt the weight of that settle, the reality, the cost. We'll take it one step at a time, he said. Claire studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Thank you for listening, for not trying to fix it. Ethan stood to rinse mugs. Some things aren't broken, he said. They're just unfinished. Claire watched him from the table, sunlight catching the edges of the room. The house didn't feel like a refuge exactly. It felt like a place that told the truth gently. Outside, the snow continued its slow retreat, revealing the roads beneath, messy, wet, navigable. And in the quiet after her confession, Claire felt the first true thing settle in her chest since she'd run. This wasn't an ending. It was a beginning that refused to be rushed. And so, the first day passed without announcements. No knocking at the door, no phone calls that made the room hold its breath, no black sedans idling at the curb. The house moved the way it always had, slowly, carefully, like a creature that had learned not to startle itself. Ethan went to work. He packed Mia's lunch, tied her scarf, walked her to the bus stop under a sky that looked scrubbed raw. Claire stayed back, insisting she would be fine, standing in the doorway with a mug cradled between her palms, like a promise she wasn't ready to make. Text me if you need anything, Ethan said. Claire nodded. I won't, she replied, and then smiled faintly. But thank you. After the bus pulled away, the house grew quiet again. Not empty. Quiet. The kind that didn't echo. Claire wandered room to room with the cautious respect of someone entering a museum after hours. She touched nothing at first. She only looked. The living room couch with its permanent dip on one side. The bookshelf where paperbacks leaned against framed photos. The hallway where Mia's height marks climbed the wall in uneven pencil lines, dates scrawled beside them like mile markers. At the end of the hall was a small room with a low table and a rolling cart of art supplies. Mia's space. The walls were crowded with drawings, some bright and chaotic, others oddly restrained. Claire recognized the pattern immediately. Children didn't stop feeling when they were grieving. They organized it. They tried to give sadness clean edges so it wouldn't spill everywhere. She sat on the floor and studied one drawing in particular. A house. A stick figure girl, a woman with a yellow circle for hair, and above them a sun that had been scribbled over until it nearly tore the paper. Claire felt something catch in her throat. When Ethan returned that afternoon, he found Claire and Mia on the floor together, surrounded by crayons and paper like the aftermath of a small, colorful storm. Mia looked up first. We're fixing it, she announced. Ethan blinked. Fixing what? My picture, Mia said, as if it were obvious. It was too loud. Claire glanced up at him, uncertainty flickering across her face. I asked if she wanted to draw it again, she said quietly. Not to erase anything, just to make room. Ethan knelt beside them. The new drawing lay between their knees. The house was still there. The girl, too. The woman remained, but she wasn't overwritten by the sun this time. Instead, the sun sat to one side, bright but no longer pressing down. Mia traced the lines with her finger. "This one can breathe," she said. Ethan swallowed. "It's beautiful." The second day brought errands. Ethan insisted on groceries, claiming necessity when he knew it was more about movement. Claire came along, wearing the same gray sweater, her hair tucked into a beanie Mia had chosen for her. Too big, slightly ridiculous. Perfect. They walked the aisles side by side, speaking in low voices, neither quite sure what this was. Claire paused often, studying ordinary things with an intensity that surprised Ethan. Cereal boxes, dish soap, the careful democracy of choice in a place where no one knew her name. At the checkout, the cashier smiled politely, eyes flicking once to Claire's wrist where the bruise still lived. Nothing happened. The world did not collapse. That night, they cooked together, nothing ambitious, just pasta and a jar of sauce that Ethan apologized for as if it were a moral failing. Claire laughed, actually laughed, when Mia declared it acceptable but not exciting. Ethan watched the two of them at the table, shoulders leaning closer than they had the night before, and felt something in the room soften. Not joy, relief. The third day was the hardest. It began with rain. Not snow this time, but the thin, needling rain of early spring that turned sidewalks slick and skies low. Ethan woke to it tapping at the windows and knew, before anything else happened, that quiet never stayed unchallenged. Claire felt it too. She stood at the window, arms crossed, staring out as if waiting for something to break the surface of the street. Ethan joined her, keeping a careful distance. "They won't let this go," she said. Ethan nodded. "I know." "My family doesn't escalate," Claire continued. "They apply pressure, slowly, in ways that make you doubt your own resistance." He thought of the mortgage letters that never threatened outright, only reminded. The insurance forms that asked politely if he'd considered lowering coverage. Systems didn't shout. They waited. "Are you afraid?" he asked. Claire considered the question. "Not of them," she said. "Of myself. Of waking up one morning and deciding it's easier to go back." Ethan didn't rush to reassure her. He'd learned that fear needed room to speak before it could loosen its grip. "Easier isn't always safer," he said. Claire nodded. "I know." That afternoon, Mia asked to go outside. The backyard had been neglected since Sarah's illness, a patch of earth where weeds had learned to be patient. Ethan had avoided it without admitting why. The soil still remembered her hands. Claire stepped into the damp grass and knelt without hesitation. She brushed aside dead leaves, exposing dark earth beneath. "We could plant something," she said. Mia's eyes widened. "Like flowers?" "Like hope," Claire replied, then winced slightly. "Sorry, that sounded nice," Mia interrupted. "Mom liked flowers." Ethan felt the old ache, sharp and familiar, but he let it pass through him instead of stopping it at the door. They didn't plant anything that day. The ground was too cold, the rain too insistent. Instead, they talked about what might grow, where the sun fell, which spots stayed stubbornly shaded, what colors Mia liked best. That evening, as Mia worked on homework at the kitchen table, Ethan and Claire sat across from each other, the quiet heavier now. "I should start making calls," Claire said. "A lawyer, someone not connected to my family." Ethan nodded. "That sounds wise." "And I should look for work," she added. "Something small, something that reminds me I can still do things." "Take your time," Ethan said. Claire met his gaze. "Time is a luxury I don't want to borrow from you." The words sat between them, honest and careful. "I'm not lending it," Ethan replied. "I'm spending it where I choose." Claire looked away, eyes bright. That night, after Mia was asleep, Ethan and Claire sat together at the table, documents spread between them like pieces of a puzzle no one should have to solve. "I don't know what this is," Claire said without turning, "but I know it won't last like this." Ethan leaned against the railing. "Nothing does." She nodded. "But these 3 days, they mattered." "Yes," he said. They did. Silence stretched between them. Not awkward, not urgent, just present. Inside, the house settled into sleep, holding its breath not from fear, but from awareness. Somewhere beyond the quiet street, the world continued its calculations. And as the last light went out and the porch fell dark, the calm they had built stood gently against the coming pressure. Because it arrived without ceremony. No knock, no announcement. Just the soft scrape of metal against metal as the mail slot opened and closed. A sound so ordinary it barely registered. Ethan noticed it only because the house had learned a new rhythm these past few days, quiet enough that small intrusions felt large. The envelope lay on the mat when he went to check the mail before work. Heavy stock, cream-colored, no return address. His name printed neatly in black, the letters precise in a way handwriting never was. It didn't look threatening. It didn't look urgent. It looked deliberate. Ethan stood there a moment longer than necessary, the cold from the porch creeping through his socks, before bending to pick it up. He felt the weight of it in his hand, thin but confident, like something that knew exactly where it belonged. Inside, the house was already awake. Mia sat at the kitchen table, humming softly as she colored. Claire stood at the counter, hair pulled back, sleeves rolled, rinsing a mug. The bruise on her wrist had faded to yellow and green, a quiet map of time passing. "Mail?" Claire asked lightly. Ethan nodded and set the envelope on the counter without opening it. He didn't know why he hesitated. He just knew he did. They ate breakfast with the envelope between them, an uninvited guest at the table. Mia chattered about a class project, about how her teacher had said the snowdrops blooming by the playground were brave flowers. "They come up when it's still cold," Mia explained. "They don't wait." Claire smiled at her. "That sounds like a good plan." When Mia left for the bus, Ethan turned the envelope over once more, then slid a finger beneath the seal. Inside were 2 documents. The first was a letter. It was beautifully written, polite, regretful, almost tender. The kind of tone that suggested concern rather than control. "We understand that emotions can run high during times of transition," it began. "Our only wish is to ensure Claire's safety and well-being. Recent events have raised questions regarding her state of mind, and we feel it is in everyone's best interest to address these concerns with care." Ethan's jaw tightened as he read on. "We are prepared to offer private transportation, medical consultation, and legal guidance to support her through this difficult period." Support, guidance, care. Each word was clean. None of them asked permission. The second document was thicker, legal language, headings, clauses, petition for temporary guardianship. Ethan felt the room tilt, not dramatically, not like panic, but the way the ground shifted beneath your feet when you realized something solid wasn't. He set the papers down slowly. Claire had gone still. She didn't reach for the documents. She didn't ask what they said. She already knew. "They moved quickly," she said. Ethan looked at her. "You've seen this before." She nodded once. "Not with my name on it." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of understanding. "They're not saying you're incapable," Ethan said carefully. "They're saying you're compromised." "That's how it starts," Claire replied. "Concern framed as kindness. They don't accuse. They imply." She finally picked up the second document, scanning it with a practiced eye. Her face didn't change, but something in her posture hardened, like a door being quietly barred. "They're asking for a psych evaluation," she said. "Short-term, temporary, just long enough to bring me back into compliance." Ethan felt a flare of anger, hot and immediate. "They can't do that." Claire met his gaze. "They can try." A knock came at the door. Both of them froze. It wasn't loud, it wasn't insistent, just 3 measured taps, evenly spaced. Ethan moved first, stepping between Claire and the hallway as if instinct alone had decided something for him. "I'll handle it," he said. He opened the door to find a man in a dark coat standing on the porch. No badge, no clipboard, just a pleasant smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Mr. Cole," the man said, voice smooth, I'm here on behalf of the family. May we speak? Ethan stepped outside, closing the door behind him. Snowmelt dripped from the eaves. The street was quiet, neighbors gone to work, the world moving on schedule. I've read the letter, Ethan said. You can leave. The man's smile held. We're not here to cause trouble. You already did. A pause. A recalibration. Our concern, the man continued, is that Miss Claire has been through a traumatic event. She ran from her own wedding. That raises questions. It raises questions, Ethan agreed. It doesn't answer them. The man tilted his head slightly. Mr. Cole, you have a child. Surely you understand the importance of stability. There it was. Not a threat. A reminder. Ethan felt his hands curl into fists inside his pockets. He thought of Mia's height marks on the wall, of the way she trusted that the house would still be standing when she came home from school. She's safe here, Ethan said. For now, the man replied gently, but temporary arrangements have a way of becoming complicated. Ethan didn't blink. You're trespassing. The man studied him for a moment, then nodded. We'll be in touch. He turned and walked away, unhurried, as if confident time was on his side. Inside, Claire stood by the window, watching. I'm sorry, she said as soon as Ethan came back in. I didn't want this to touch your life. Ethan held up the envelope. It already did. They sat at the table again, the documents spread between them like a map of a place neither wanted to go. They're counting on me doubting myself, Claire said quietly, on me deciding it's easier to comply than to fight. And are you? Ethan asked. She closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, there was fear there, but also resolve. No, she said. But I need help. Ethan nodded. Then we'll get it, on your terms. What if they come back? She asked. With more pressure? Ethan thought of the way systems worked, not with force, but with patience. Then we stand, he said, one step at a time. That evening, after Mia was asleep, Ethan and Claire sat at the kitchen table again. Claire typed on her laptop, reaching out to independent counsel, to old contacts she'd been taught not to rely on anymore. Ethan watched the clock, acutely aware of how much he was risking and how little he regretted it. Outside, the streetlights came on, one by one. The envelope lay empty now, its contents sorted and named. The quiet of the past 3 days had been real. So was what followed. And as the house settled around them, not fragile but alert, Ethan understood something he hadn't before. Peace was not the absence of pressure. It was the decision to remain present when pressure arrived. Therefore, the fear did not arrive all at once. It seeped in quietly, like damp through old wood, slow enough to deny, persistent enough to change the shape of things. By morning, the house felt different, not unsafe, aware. Ethan noticed it first in the way he checked the windows before starting coffee, then in how he listened for footsteps on the sidewalk longer than necessary. He told himself it was caution, not panic. He had learned the difference the hard way. Claire noticed it too. She moved with purpose now, not drifting through rooms but choosing where to stand, where to sit. She kept her phone close. She took notes. The practiced competence that had once served other people's agendas returned, sharpened, and reclaimed. After breakfast, Mia lingered by the door, backpack slung over one shoulder. Is something wrong? She asked. Children asked questions the way surgeons used scalpels, clean cuts, no anesthesia. Ethan knelt to zip her jacket. No, he said, and meant it as much as he could. Just a busy day. Mia looked past him at Claire. Are the quiet men coming back? Claire's breath caught. Ethan straightened slowly. What quiet men? The ones who make the air feel tight, Mia said, shrugging. I don't like them. Claire crouched beside her. If anyone comes, she said gently, your dad will handle it. He's very good at that. Mia studied her, then nodded, apparently satisfied. She kissed Ethan's cheek and ran down the steps, boots thudding with childhood certainty. When the door closed, the silence pressed in. They're already touching her world, Claire said softly. That's what scares me. Ethan nodded. Me too. The call came mid-morning. Ethan was replacing a cracked tile in the school hallway when his phone vibrated in his pocket. Unknown number. He let it ring once, twice, then answered. Mr. Cole, a woman's voice said. Calm, professional. This is Attorney Halverson. I represent parties concerned with Miss Claire's welfare. Ethan stepped into an empty classroom and closed the door. I'm listening, he said. We've been made aware, she continued, that Miss Claire is currently residing in your home. That's correct. There are concerns regarding her mental and emotional state following the incident at the wedding. Running from a wedding isn't a diagnosis, Ethan replied. A pause, not hesitation, adjustment. Of course, Halverson said. However, her family has reason to believe she may be acting under duress. In such cases, temporary guardianship ensures safety. And if she refuses? Another pause, longer this time. Mr. Cole, Halverson said, I want to be very clear. Continued interference could expose you to liability. Ethan felt something cold settle in his chest. What kind of liability? You have a minor child, she said gently. Living arrangements matter, stability matters, associations matter. There it was, not a threat. A suggestion sharpened to a point. Ethan ended the call without another word. He stood alone in the classroom, staring at the chipped chalkboard where someone had once written, "Be kind," and forgotten to erase it. His hands shook, not with fear for himself, but with the sudden, sick clarity of what was being leveraged. When he got home, Claire was at the table, laptop open, legal tabs blooming across the screen like warning lights. They called you, she said. Yes. Her jaw tightened. They brought Mia into it. Yes. Silence fell, heavy and absolute. I won't let this hurt her, Claire said finally. I won't be the reason you lose anything. Ethan watched her carefully. The old instinct rose in him, the need to shield, to insist, to refuse sacrifice on his behalf. He had done that once before, with Sarah, and learned too late that love sometimes required a different kind of courage. What are you thinking? He asked. Claire closed the laptop. I should leave. The words landed like a dropped plate, clean, irreversible. No, Ethan said immediately. She shook her head. Listen to me. This is how they work. They don't need to win outright. They just need to make staying expensive. Ethan leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. He pictured Mia's room, the height marks, the way his daughter trusted that home meant permanence. I won't trade one person's safety for another's, he said. That's exactly what they're forcing, Claire replied. Her voice broke despite her control. And they know it. The front door opened then, the sound startling in the quiet. Mia stepped in, cheeks flushed from the cold. The bus came early, she announced, then stopped short when she saw their faces. She looked between them, eyes narrowing. You're fighting, she said. No, Ethan said too quickly. Yes, Claire said softly. Mia dropped her backpack. Is it because of me? Ethan crossed the room in 2 strides and knelt in front of her. Never, he said. This is grown-up stuff. Mia considered that. Grown-up stuff usually means people don't say what they mean. Claire felt tears burn her eyes. Mia, she said gently, if I went away for a little while, would you think it was your fault? Mia frowned deeply, then shook her head. People leave for reasons, she said. My mom didn't choose to, but she still left. The room went very still. Ethan closed his eyes. I don't want you to go, Mia added. But I don't want you to be sad here either. Claire knelt, bringing herself level with the child. What would you want me to do? Mia thought hard. I think, she said slowly, that if someone is trying to push you, you should push back, but not with yelling, with truth. Claire laughed through tears. You're very wise, Mia shrugged. My teacher says that. That night, after Mia was asleep, Ethan and Claire sat together at the table, documents spread between them like pieces of a puzzle no one should have to solve. If I leave, Claire said, they win quietly. And if you stay, Ethan replied. They escalate. Yes. Ethan stared at the papers, then pushed them aside. Then we changed the terms. Claire looked at him. How? You stop running, he said. Not away, toward. She understood him then. Not fully, but enough. They expect silence, he continued. Compliance, a private resolution. What they don't expect is clarity. Claire inhaled slowly. Public clarity. Ethan nodded. On your terms, with counsel who answers to you. She closed her eyes, fear and resolve crossing her face like weather. That means standing in the open. Yes. And it means you being seen too. He met her gaze. I can handle being seen. Claire reached across the table and took his hand, not romantically, steadily. Thank you, she said, for not making this easy. Ethan squeezed her fingers once. Easy isn't the goal. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, carrying the promise of confrontation. The quiet days were over. What remained was choice, clear, costly, and necessary. And for the first time since she had run, Claire felt the ground beneath her feet. However, Claire did not sleep. She lay awake in the guest room listening to the house breathe. The distant click of the furnace, the soft tick of the hallway clock, the muted certainty that Ethan and Mia were behind closed doors, trusting the night to keep its promises. The storm had moved on, leaving the air sharp and clear, the kind that made every decision feel exposed. By dawn, she knew what she would do. She rose quietly, showered, dressed in borrowed clothes that no longer felt borrowed, and sat at the small desk by the window. The light was thin, but honest. It showed her hands exactly as they were when she placed them on the keyboard. Steady, not fearless, resolved. She opened her laptop. The first email went to a lawyer whose name she had kept in a private notebook for years, someone she had been advised never to contact without permission. Independent, relentless, unimpressed by prestige. Claire wrote plainly, without drama, without apology. Facts, dates, attachments. She sent copies of the documents that had arrived in the envelope, annotated with her own notes in the margins, where language blurred into suggestion, where care pretended to be control. The second email went to a clinician recommended by a colleague she trusted, requesting an evaluation on her terms, voluntary, transparent, recorded. Claire refused the frame that had been prepared for her. She would not be examined in silence or labeled in absence. The third email was the hardest. She drafted it, erased it, drafted it again. This one did not go to lawyers or doctors. It went to herself, addressed to the professional identity she had allowed to be folded into a holding company, diluted into press releases and approved statements. She wrote a declaration, brief and unornamented, affirming her capacity and intent to act on her own behalf. She signed it with her full name. Then she printed it. Downstairs, Ethan was already awake. He stood at the counter pouring coffee when Claire entered the kitchen, papers tucked neatly under her arm. "Morning," he said. "Morning," she replied. They did not speak for a moment. They didn't need to. The room felt different, charged, awake, like a place that had agreed to something without needing to say it out loud. "I'm going to stop running," Claire said. Ethan set the mug down carefully. "Tell me how." She spread the papers on the table. "I'm filing a voluntary declaration of capacity. Today, I'm scheduling my own evaluation. I'm retaining independent counsel, and..." She met his eyes. "I'm going to be visible." Ethan nodded. "They won't like that." "They're counting on that," Claire said. "Silence is their leverage." "And Mia?" Ethan asked quietly. Claire's throat tightened. "I won't let this touch her," she said. "If at any point it does, I step back." Ethan considered that. He thought of the call, the word stability sharpened into a blade. He thought of Mia's certainty when she spoke of truth. "We'll build guardrails," he said. "Together." Mia came into the kitchen a moment later, hair half-braided, backpack slung with careless confidence. She eyed the papers, then Claire. "You look different," she said. I decided something, Claire replied. Mia nodded as if that explained everything. Okay. They walked Mia to the bus stop under a sky that promised rain later. The bus hissed to a halt. Mia climbed aboard, then turned back. If the quiet people come, she said, you don't have to answer the door. Ethan smiled. I know. After the bus disappeared, Claire and Ethan returned inside. The phone rang before they could sit. Attorney Halverson again. Ethan answered, put the call on speaker, and set the phone between them. Mr. Cole, Halverson said, her voice unchanged. We're prepared to proceed. So are we, Claire said calmly. There was a pause. Miss Claire, this conversation should be on record, Claire finished. It is. Another pause, this one heavier. I am represented, Claire continued. My counsel will contact you today. I am also submitting a voluntary declaration of capacity and scheduling an independent evaluation. Any further attempts to characterize my actions without my consent will be addressed formally. Silence. Ethan felt it, the recalibration. The moment power discovered resistance that wasn't loud enough to crush. We're concerned about your well-being, Halverson said at last. Then respect my autonomy, Claire replied. Concern that requires my erasure is not concern. The line went dead. They sat in the aftermath, the kitchen suddenly too quiet. That went better than expected, Ethan said. Claire exhaled, shaky but proud. It's just beginning. The first appointment took place that afternoon. Claire drove herself. Ethan waited in the parking lot, hands wrapped around a paper cup he didn't drink from, watching people come and go. He thought of Sarah's appointments, of the way waiting could feel like penance. When Claire emerged an hour later, her shoulders were squared, her eyes clear. How did it go? He asked. As it should, she said. Honest. The lawyer called next, then the notary, then a colleague who offered a short-term contract, quiet work, defined scope, no strings. Each call built a ladder rung by rung, not to escape, but to stand. By evening, the house was full of paper, documents labeled, clipped, named, not weapons, tools. Mia did her homework at the table while Claire typed. Ethan cooked. The ordinary resumed itself with a steadiness that felt earned. After dinner, Claire stepped onto the back porch. The air smelled like wet earth. The neglected yard lay dark and patient beyond the railing. Ethan joined her, leaning against the post. I'm scared, Claire said. I know, he replied. But I'm not confused, she added. That's new. Ethan smiled faintly. Clarity changes the temperature of fear. She laughed softly. You should write that down. They stood together, not touching, not distant, aligned. The knock came at dusk. Not 3 taps this time. 2. Ethan opened the door to find a courier holding a slim folder. No speech, no smile, just a receipt pad. Ethan signed and closed the door. Inside the folder was a notice, acknowledgement of receipt, acknowledgement of challenge, acknowledgement of process. The machinery had adjusted its posture. It would not stop, but it had recognized the rules. Mia peeked from the hallway. Is it bad? No, Claire said. It's official. Mia nodded. Good. Later, when the house went quiet, Claire returned to the guest room and placed the declaration on the desk. She stood there a long moment, hands resting on the wood, feeling the truth of what she had done. She had not won, but she had stood. Down the hall, Ethan listened to the house settle. He felt the risk like a steady pulse beneath his ribs, and alongside it something else. Respect, not for himself, for the choice unfolding in front of him. Outside, the streetlight flickered, then held. The yard waited for spring. The world did not soften its edges, but it did not close in either. Claire lay down at last, sleep coming in pieces. She did not dream of running. She dreamed of standing. Until. The meeting was scheduled for 10 o'clock. Not 9:58, not 10:05. 10, on the dot. That detail mattered more than anyone said out loud. Ethan noticed it when he parked across the street from the law offices. Glass and limestone, precise angles, a building that believed in order the way some people believed in God. He turned off the engine and sat for a moment, hands resting on the wheel, letting the quiet settle his breathing. Claire sat beside him, calm in a way that felt earned rather than rehearsed. She wore a simple navy coat, hair pulled back, no jewelry except a thin silver chain she had owned long before contracts tried to own her. In her lap lay a slim folder, copies, tabs, notes in her handwriting. Nothing ornamental, everything intentional. "You don't have to come in," she said softly. Ethan looked at her. "I know." She studied his face for a second, then nodded. "Thank you for choosing to." Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of citrus and money. A receptionist glanced up, confirmed names, gestured toward a seating area where leather chairs faced each other across a low table. No art, no distractions, just clean space designed to keep emotion from echoing. They waited less than a minute. Attorney Halverson emerged first, mid-40s, impeccably dressed, expression neutral in a way that suggested careful training. She greeted Claire with professional warmth that did not quite reach acknowledgement. "Miss Claire," she said, "thank you for coming." "Of course," Claire replied. "Transparency matters." They were led into a conference room with a long table and a window that looked out over the city. The view was intentional. Perspective, offered at a price. 2 other attorneys were already seated, one younger, eyes sharp, one older, unreadable. A legal pad lay in front of each of them, blank and waiting. They stood when Claire entered. Courtesy without concession. Ethan took the chair beside her. He placed his hands flat on the table and said nothing. Halverson began. "We appreciate your willingness to engage constructively." Claire nodded. "I appreciate clarity." The older attorney folded his hands. "Our client's concern remains your well-being." "I understand," Claire said, "which is why I'm here with documentation." She slid the folder across the table, not aggressively, deliberately. Halverson glanced through the pages, eyes moving quickly. The younger attorney leaned in, interest sharpening. "Voluntary declaration of capacity," Halverson read. "Independent evaluation scheduled. Counsel retained." "Yes," Claire said, "on my terms." Silence followed. The city moved behind the glass. Ethan watched the attorneys adjust, not in panic, not in anger, in recalculation. The machinery shifting gears. The older attorney spoke. "You must understand how this appears." "I do," Claire replied. "It appears as a woman exercising autonomy." The younger attorney smiled thinly. "Autonomy can be compromised by stress." "Which is why consent matters," Claire said. "Mine." Halverson inhaled, then tried a different angle. "Our clients are concerned that your current living situation may not provide appropriate support." Ethan felt the temperature change. He didn't move. "My living situation," Claire said calmly, "is temporary and chosen. I am not isolated. I am not incapacitated. And I am not subject to involuntary guardianship." Halverson's gaze flicked to Ethan, then back to Claire. "Mr. Cole has a child." Ethan spoke then, his voice even. "Yes." The room turned slightly, as if acknowledging an object that had always been there. "We would hate," Halverson continued carefully, "for complications to arise." Ethan met her eyes. "So would I." The older attorney tapped his pen once. "We're not here to threaten." "I know," Ethan said. "You're here to imply." A pause. Respect flickered. Brief, reluctant. Claire reached into her folder and removed one more document. "This is my notarized statement," she said, placing it squarely on the table. "It affirms my capacity, my residence by choice, and my refusal of third-party control." She let the words stand without embellishment. "If further action is taken," she added, "it will be contested, publicly if necessary." That did it. Not outrage, not fear, recognition. The older attorney leaned back. "Public proceedings benefit no one." "They benefit the truth," Claire replied. Halverson closed the folder slowly. "Our clients will review." "Of course," Claire said. "They should." The meeting ended without raised voices, without victory laps, without promises. When they stood, the attorneys shook Claire's hand, polite, professional, the kind of contact that acknowledged resistance without admitting defeat. Outside, the air felt different, not lighter, clearer. Ethan and Claire walked a block before either spoke. "That went," Ethan began. Exactly as it needed to, Claire finished. She exhaled, long and steady, like someone setting something heavy down. They didn't win, Ethan said. No, Claire agreed. But they didn't disappear either. That's not nothing, she smiled faintly. It's everything. They drove back in silence, the city receding, the neighborhood softening as they approached home. When they pulled into the driveway, the porch light was on, the same small, stubborn welcome. Inside, Mia sat at the table with homework spread wide. She looked up, eyes searching. Well? She asked. Claire knelt beside her. They listened. Mia considered that. Did they stop? Not completely, Claire said. But they heard me. Mia nodded, satisfied. That's how it starts. That night, after Mia slept, Ethan and Claire sat on the back porch again. The air held the promise of spring. The yard waited. I won't stay forever, Claire said quietly. Ethan nodded. I know. But I won't disappear, she added. And I won't go back. He met her gaze. Good. They sat without touching, without distance, two people who had chosen alignment over certainty. Inside, the house settled, not braced for impact, but grounded. The confrontation had come and gone without screams, without spectacle. What remained was quieter, heavier, and more honest. Not victory, agency. And as the night deepened and the world recalculated its approach, Claire felt something steady take root where fear had lived. Almost. Spring did not arrive all at once. It came in increments. Longer light in the evenings, softer mornings, the first stubborn green pressing through soil that had learned to endure. The world did not reset itself for them. It simply continued. And that, Ethan realized, was its quiet mercy. Claire moved out on a Tuesday. Not because anyone asked her to, not because pressure returned with sharper edges, but because staying, she decided, needed to remain a choice, not a refuge mistaken for permanence. She rented a small apartment 10 minutes away. Second floor, big windows. A kitchen that smelled like paint and possibility. She brought very little with her. A suitcase, a laptop, a folder that no longer felt like armor but like record. Ethan helped carry boxes up the narrow stairs. He didn't linger. He didn't hover. He knew the difference now between support and shadow. Dinner on Fridays? He asked, standing in the doorway. Claire smiled. If you'll let me bring dessert. Mia insisted on approving the place. She walked from room to room with exaggerated seriousness, nodding occasionally as if checking off invisible criteria. It's good, she declared at last. But you need plants. Claire laughed. I was hoping you'd say that. Work came next. Not the grand return people imagined when they heard the word comeback, but something quieter and more durable. A nonprofit needed help with messaging. A campaign focused on access, not image. Defined scope, clear boundaries, paid fairly. Claire said yes. The first paycheck felt surreal, not because of the amount, but because of what it represented. Money earned without exchange of self, work done without erasure. She framed it anyway, hung it above her desk, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. The calls slowed, not stopped, never that, but shifted. Lawyers spoke to lawyers. Language tightened. What had once been implied now required justification. The machinery adjusted its posture again, recognizing a presence that would not yield quietly. Claire did not celebrate. She documented. Ethan returned to his routines with a new steadiness. Maintenance calls, evening deliveries reduced to weekends. He slept better, not longer, but deeper. The kind of sleep that didn't feel like escape. Mia changed too. Not dramatically, not in ways that made for easy narratives, but she laughed more easily. She asked questions again. She brought friends home without apologizing for the quiet rooms. One afternoon, she asked Ethan if they could go outside. The backyard still bore the evidence of neglect, patches of earth where weeds had learned patience, corners Sarah once tended that had grown wild without her hands. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. They stood there together, the three of them, measuring sunlight and shade the way you measured the future, carefully, without guarantees. Claire knelt and pressed her fingers into the soil. It's ready, she said. Mia grinned. Mom used to say dirt remembers. They planted that weekend. Nothing extravagant. Herbs, a few perennials, one small rose bush chosen deliberately, not to replace anything, not to recreate what had been lost, but to begin something that belonged to now. Ethan watched Mia pat the soil down, tongue caught between her teeth in concentration. He felt the familiar ache rise and pass. Grief, he had learned, didn't leave. It learned to sit beside other things. That night, after the garden was watered and the house settled, Mia sat at the kitchen table with crayons spread before her. "I made something," she announced. She slid the paper toward them. It was a drawing of the house. The porch light was on. 3 figures stood together in the yard, one taller, one smaller, one between. Above them, a sun hovered, present but no longer overwhelming. At the bottom, in careful 8-year-old handwriting, were the words, "My family is growing." Claire felt tears rise before she could stop them. Ethan reached for the drawing and studied it quietly. He didn't correct it. He didn't qualify it. "Can we hang it?" Mia asked. "Of course," Ethan said. They placed it on the refrigerator among grocery lists and old photos and the ordinary artifacts of living. It did not erase anything. It joined. Later, when Mia was asleep, Claire stood in the kitchen alone for a moment, looking at the drawing. She traced the letters with her finger, feeling something settle in her chest that she had chased for years without naming. Belonging, she realized, wasn't being claimed. It was being welcomed without obligation. "I should go," she said softly when Ethan joined her. He nodded. "Drive safe." At the door, she paused. "I've been thinking about what Mia said, about families growing." Ethan waited. "I don't know what this becomes," Claire continued, "and I won't promise something I'm not ready to build, but I do know I want to keep choosing this, honestly, without fear." Ethan met her gaze. "That's enough." She smiled, steady, unafraid. "It is." They hugged briefly, without urgency or confusion. When Claire stepped back into the night, she did so without looking over her shoulder. Weeks passed. The rosebush took. The herbs grew. The house breathed. Claire's life expanded, not outward into spectacle, but inward into clarity. She attended meetings. She declined invitations that smelled like compromise. She learned the pleasure of saying no without explanation. Ethan watched from the edges, not as a rescuer, not as an anchor, but as someone who respected the line between presence and possession. One evening, as dusk softened the street, Mia asked a question she'd been holding for a while. "Are you and Claire going to get married?" Ethan smiled gently. "Why do you ask?" Mia shrugged. "Just wondering." He thought carefully before answering. "I don't know," he said. "Some things don't need to be decided fast." Mia considered this, then nodded. "Okay." She returned to her drawing without distress, satisfied with the honesty. That night, Ethan stood at the back window and watched the yard settle into shadow. He thought of Sarah, not with sharp pain, but with gratitude that had learned to coexist with loss. He thought of Claire, standing, choosing, becoming, and he thought of the quiet truth that had threaded through all of it. Love wasn't always the story of 2 people finding each other. Sometimes it was the story of people finding themselves, side by side, without ownership, without fear. Outside, the porch light clicked on automatically as the sky darkened. Inside, the refrigerator hummed. Somewhere in the city, systems recalibrated. Somewhere else, a woman slept in a space she had chosen. And in a house that had learned how to open its door again, a father and a child rested in the knowledge that family did not end when it changed, at last.